Go open your fridge right now. Milk, cheese, yogurt, maybe a tub of ice cream. To your ancestors, that whole shelf is basically poison. And that's not a figure of speech, it's biology. So what did your ancestors actually eat? The answer will change the way you look at every craving you have, because everything you crave today, fat, sugar, salt, anything energy-dense, is a fossil of some survival lesson. And one of those lessons is heavy enough that most videos on this topic just skim past it. This one won't. It starts with the glass of milk in your fridge. About 65% of the world's population today still can't properly digest milk after weaning. Drink it and you get bloating, cramps, diarrhea. That's not a disorder. That's the default setting. For most of human history, most adults couldn't easily digest large amounts of fresh milk because the body normally reduces lactase production after weaning. Then, roughly 7,500 years ago, somewhere around Central Europe, a genetic mutation appeared. A small group of cattle herders kept the ability to digest milk for life. An extra calorie source their neighbors didn't have, better odds of surviving famine, more surviving children. The mutation spread. And if you can drink milk today without issue, you're a descendant of it. Not because milk is somehow natural human food, but because you happen to carry a mutation that was once rare. Your fridge, it turns out, is full of things the human body was never designed to eat. And that's just the milk. Rewind about 3 million years. Your earliest ancestors weren't hunters. They were scavengers. When a lion brought down an antelope on the African savanna, it ate the best parts first. Muscle, liver, heart. Next came the hyenas, cleaning up the hide, cartilage, ribs. By the time your ancestors got there, much of what remained may have been thick leg bones. Bones that still contained valuable marrow inside. And that was dinner. Using sharp-edged stones to smash open long leg bones, they pulled out the gray marrow inside and ate it raw, slick and rich with fat. This was an exclusive feast. Humans had the one tool nobody else had, hands built for smashing. They also ate brain, a full pound of dense fat packed inside a cracked open skull. Then insects, termites, grubs, beetles, fat white worms the size of a thumb. It sounds grim, but that was dinner. And if you're wincing right now, hold on to that feeling. This is only the mildest item on the list of things your ancestors put in their mouths. There's something further down that list that will make you pause for a few seconds. That way of life continued until one breakthrough rewrote every rule of survival. Fire. The oldest widely accepted evidence sits in Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, dated to roughly 1 million years ago. Plant ash and burned bone fragments buried deep in the sediment, reported by Francesco Berna's research team in 2012. In recent years, some newer analyses have pushed that timeline back even further. But whatever the exact number turns out to be, one thing is certain. Fire wasn't just a tool for keeping the dark and predators at bay. It handed humanity a one-of-a-kind advantage: cooked food. Cooking is, at its core, digestion that happens outside the body first. Eating raw food forces your digestive system to grind away for hours, breaking down complex bonds. Cooked food arrives with those bonds already broken. Your body spends far less effort and pulls far more energy out of the same amount of food. A cooked piece of meat, it turns out, is a genuinely bigger energy payload than the same piece raw and bloody. In 1995, anthropologists Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler gave this broader energetic trade-off a name: the expensive tissue hypothesis. One proposed explanation is that as higher quality foods became more important, the human gut no longer needed to be as long or as thick to grind down raw material, so it gradually shrank. A smaller gut costs less energy to run, and that freed up energy, instead of feeding a bulky digestive tract, started flowing to one place: the brain. The brain is 2% of your body weight but burns roughly 20% of your daily energy intake. It's an extraordinarily expensive organ to keep running. You cannot power that machine on raw leaves and termites. And the cost paid off. Your ancestors' brains tripled in size compared to your last common ancestor with chimpanzees, from around 400 cc to over 1,300 cc. No other primate in history could afford an expansion that costly, simply because no other species had learned to turn food into calories more efficiently through fire. From there, the menu exploded. By around 300,000 years ago, your ancestors were eating almost anything they could catch, dig up, or reach. Mammoth, bison, fish, shellfish, roots, berries, nuts, mushrooms, bird eggs. How do we know? Dental calculus. Yes, that yellow buildup your dentist scrapes off at every checkup. When scientists analyze fossilized dental calculus under a microscope, they find intact starch grains from tubers, roots, wild seeds, trapped in there for hundreds of thousands of years. Grains too small to see with the naked eye, but still holding the distinctive shape of the plant they came from under magnification. It's archaeology's version of a tiny fridge, telling us exactly what your ancestors put in their mouths, where, and in which season. In 2011, archaeologist Amanda Henry and colleagues published a PNAS study analyzing dental calculus from Neanderthal, remains at Shanidar Cave, Iraq, and Spy Cave, Belgium. They found starch grains from dates, legumes, and wild grass seeds, many of which are still on modern menus today. But the most striking detail was in the structure of the starch grains themselves. Some showed the specific kind of damage that only happens when starch is cooked, not eaten raw. Neanderthals, a species old textbooks once painted as raw meat-gnawing brutes, apparently cooked their seeds, cooked their roots, and had a far more complex diet than the popular image suggests. And in that ancient fridge, there was one thing that shows up far more often than you'd expect. Honey. For the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer communities on Earth, wild honey accounts for as much as 15% of total yearly caloric intake. Despite having to climb impossibly tall trees, smoke out an entire furious hive, and take dozens of stings in the process, they never give it up. The reason, in nature, almost no food source packs that much energy into such a small serving. Honey is essentially pure sugar, prepackaged by thousands of bees. That same primal hunger for energy survives today as your sweet tooth. For hundreds of thousands of years, the brain was wired to crave it because sugar delivers a double payoff: instant energy plus surplus fat stored for the next famine. Wild honey and a glazed donut can activate many of the same ancient sweet taste and reward systems. The modern food industry has exploited that ancient mechanism ruthlessly. Alongside that, there's another reaction quietly running inside you right now. A biological program hardwired for fear of bitterness. In nature, bitterness signals toxicity. Alkaloids in leaves, glycosides in unripe fruit, things that can kill you. People who swallowed bitter compounds by accident often didn't survive. The ones who spat it out immediately did. Over millions of years of evolution, humans ended up with roughly 25 genes dedicated to bitter taste receptors, while sweet and umami combined use a mere 3. That's not an accident. It's a full-blown warning network, running constantly with a single command. Do not swallow under any circumstances. This instinct explains why kids hate vegetables. It's not pickiness or stubbornness. It's an ancient biological program executing perfectly as designed. Green leaf, bitter taste, likely lethal, spit it out. The modern brain needs years of repeated, deliberate exposure to override that ancient signal and gradually accept that broccoli is not, in fact, poison. Every craving or aversion you have toward a particular food today is really a fossil of the past. You crave fat because fat was once desperately scarce and could save your life. You crave salt because salt was hard to find in nature, and going without it meant death. You crave sugar because sugar signaled energy that needed to be consumed immediately before someone else got to it first. And you hate bitterness simply because bitterness used to be the line between alive and dead. But there's one craving humanity finds very hard to admit to. Before we go further, if you're starting to see your late-night cravings differently right now, a quick like costs you nothing. But it tells the algorithm this is worth pushing to more people. Now to the heaviest part. In Gough's Cave in England, researchers found human bones roughly 14,700 years old. Skulls cleaned with stone tools, the face and base carefully removed, the brain case shaped into a cup. Meticulous, unhurried craftsmanship. Long bones smashed open, exactly the way their earliest ancestors smashed antelope bones for marrow, millions of years earlier. And here's what makes the story worse. It wasn't hunger. The same cave was full of discarded horse and deer bones. Food wasn't scarce. In 2017, archaeologist James Cole published research calculating the caloric value of a human body compared to large fauna of the same era. The result, an adult human body holds about 125,000 calories. Cole's precise figure came out to 125,122. A mammoth's muscle tissue alone, by comparison, provides over 3.6 million calories. A horse, a large bison, or a big deer all deliver considerably more calories than a human, with far less risk involved. No need to confront another group of humans defending their own. In other words, purely in terms of energy efficiency, a human being is a bad choice. Eating a fellow human isn't more efficient than eating a deer. So why did people do it anyway? One forearm bone at Gough's cave was engraved with a zigzag pattern after the flesh had been completely removed, not to scrape off any remaining tissue since the bone was already clean by then. Researchers described this as a form of ritual, not desperation, and similar traces, human bones processed the way prey animals were, sometimes carrying engraved patterns, show up in Germany, France, Spain, Croatia. Across many places, many different periods within the Paleolithic. Not always about survival, sometimes funerary ritual, sometimes trophies from conflict between groups. Archaeologists still debate it, and may never know the motive behind any single case for certain. Gough's cave isn't an isolated case. At El Sidrón, a cave in Asturias, northern Spain, archaeologists uncovered the remains of 12 to 13 Neanderthal individuals, likely a family group including men, women, adolescents, and infants who lived roughly 49,000 years ago. Their bones show clear cut marks, signs of marrow extraction, and crushed skulls. But the context here is different from Gough's cave. There are no comparable engraved bones or carefully produced skull cups. Researchers still debate whether this resulted from nutritional stress, violence between groups, or some other circumstance. The same act, eating one's own kind, but potentially two entirely different stories behind it. One a symbolic choice, the other still unresolved. Hardest thing to swallow. But it's not the last stop, because your ancestors also ate something you would throw straight in the trash: rotten meat. A hunter would bring down prey, not finish it in a day, bury it in the ground, hide it in a cave, sink it in a cold stream to store it. Weeks later, sometimes months later, they'd come back for it. Meat crawling with maggots, reeking. They ate it anyway. And plenty of ethnographic evidence suggests they might have actually liked it. Decomposing meat has already had its protein structure broken down by bacteria, easier to chew, easier to absorb, and some of that fermentation even generates extra vitamin B12 in the process. Indigenous communities across the Arctic still deliberately bury fish or seal meat to ferment for months before eating it, treating it as a delicacy rather than a last resort. And here's the twist. You're still eating that same thing every single day, just under a more polite name. Cheese is controlled rotten milk. Beer, wine, kimchi, soy sauce, pickles, vinegar, all of it is, at its core, decomposition that humans domesticated and rebranded. Your taste for cheese didn't start in a French dairy. It started on the savannah, hundreds of thousands of years ago, in a cave where meat was buried. But this isn't really just a story about what your ancestors ate. It's a story about the fact that your body is still living in that world, even though the world has completely changed. And the clearest proof sits inside your own gut. In 2014, a research team led by Stephanie Schnorr published a comparison in Nature Communications between the gut microbiome of the Hadza and that of urban Italians. The result, Hadza guts were far more diverse and richer in bacterial strains, richer even than several traditional farming communities elsewhere in Africa. Their guts host bacterial strains specialized in breaking down raw plant fiber, tough roots, wild game meat, strains that modern Western guts have largely lost. Some Western guts are even missing an entire group of bacteria common in nearly every other population studied. Your gut, meanwhile, has adapted to processed food, refined sugar, and white flour. 3 million years of evolution built you a digestive system. Then a few hundred years of industrialization rewrote its software, but the hardware stayed exactly the same. That's also why calling it an eating disorder or lack of willpower is the wrong diagnosis. You don't have a modern brain. You have a Stone Age brain. Trained relentlessly for 3 million years to hunt down scarce calories, scarce fat, scarce sugar, and to hoard whatever could be hoarded. And right now, it's standing in a supermarket where all of that sits stacked on shelves in unlimited quantities, open 24 hours a day. That's not your fault. That's a brain doing exactly the job it was built to do in a world that changed the rules without ever telling it. But understanding the reason doesn't mean you're exempt. Your ancestors craved fat and sugar because they had almost no choice but to eat whenever they could. You do have a choice. Knowing your brain is running 3 million-year-old software isn't an excuse to hand it the wheel completely. It's a tool for recognizing when you're reacting on pure instinct and when you're actually choosing. At 11 p.m., when you open the fridge without being hungry, you're running that exact program. It's still scanning, still searching, still trying to keep you alive through a famine that is never coming. It might sound like your ancestors understood their own bodies better than you understand yours. But don't rush to romanticize that era. For most of those 3 million years, a meal wasn't something that happened 3 times a day on a fixed schedule. It happened whenever you got lucky. Some days, nothing. Some weeks, almost nothing. Children died of malnutrition before they could walk. The elderly died from broken teeth, couldn't chew, couldn't eat, and not eating meant death. That's simple. No exceptions. No emergency room. In 2007, anthropologists Michael Gervin and Hillard Kaplan published the largest cross-cultural study to date on hunter-gatherer longevity, based on real mortality records rather than assumptions. Life expectancy at birth came out to just 21 to 37 years, a number that sounds devastating. But that's largely because infant and child mortality was so brutally high it drags the average down. Anyone who survived to age 15, past the most dangerous stretch, had a genuinely good shot at a long life. The most common adult age at death fell somewhere between 68 and 78, nearly matching modern human lifespans. In other words, that era didn't kill everyone off at 30 the way movies love to portray it. It was brutal specifically at both ends of life, right at birth, and once the teeth wore out. Your fridge, with its leftover pizza and a can of soda forgotten in the back, would bring 99.99% of everyone who ever lived in human history to their knees. Not because it tastes good, because it's there, and available, without costing you sweat or your life. So next time, at midnight, when you're standing in front of an open fridge, cold light on your face, picking something up and putting it back down, know that whatever's steering your hand right now is older than language, older than fire, older than the part of your brain saying, I'm not even hungry. 3 million years is still running inside you, and there's no off switch. Do you ever catch yourself opening the fridge at midnight even when you're not hungry? Tell me in the comments. You'll probably be surprised how many people do exactly the same thing.